I'm wearing a hat today that you might not be able to read, but I was looking forward to this hat. I've never been a hat guy, but now I own 4 hats that I enjoy, and this is one of those 4. And I'm not just wearing a hat because I was worried about a bad hair day. That's never held me back in the past to go hatless, as you guys probably know. I'm wearing a hat today because I got this hat from Fight for the Future, and it says Save Net Neutrality. The print's a little small, and I was looking at it on camera. I'm like, I'm worried. I don't know if anyone can read this, but but I'm still wearing it. And if you dig this hat, you can check it out over at fightforthefuture.org. I was really happy to buy this hat. You guys know that they're doing some good work, and I've had the privilege to collaborate with them on a couple campaigns, which was an amazing experience for me, and I look forward to collaborating again in the future. And I thought that my guest today would be the perfect guest for me to sport this hat. My guest today works with the Movement Alliance Project, which addresses race and inequality in technology. She is a writer, she's an activist, and she's done a lot of work with Prometheus Radio, with just all kinds of organizations. I've been following her for years, and she's just on the ground floor of just so many amazing things. So I'm really excited to talk to her today. Please welcome to the show, Hannah Sassaman. Hannah, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I love that you're wearing a Fight for the Future hat. I'm actually on the board of Fight for the Future.
Yes, so, yes, you are.
That's great. And I haven't seen that hat in a while, but it's lovely to be here with you.
Thank you. Yeah. I've always wanted to buy the hat, so I picked it up recently, and it came in, and I was like, oh man, I got to wear it for a show because it's my Save Net Neutrality hat. And
the show is the reason why we can watch your show and enjoy, all kinds of different content is because of that, First Amendment of the internet, where your content that, communities fighting police brutality, fighting for a just immigration system, hoping to make sure that the budget goes where communities want it in their town. Like, they need to make sure that the internet isn't just for profit, that it's not discriminated against based on the content that's being put out there. So that hat, this show, it's all of a piece. So it's great to see.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a big part of the mission here. We cover a lot of net neutrality stuff, and also municipal broadband, which is city-owned internet, which I know that Philadelphia, where your organization is based, had a big case involving that not too long ago. There was that part of town where I think it was Comcast. They needed Comcast to do a hotspot for some students. And do you remember that? I forget all the details off the top of my head.
So we're really involved in that quite a bit right now. Like, at the moment, Philadelphia is the poorest big city in the United States. So for millions of students around the United States face the shutdown in March of public education, or in most cases even in private education. And if they didn't have a reliable internet, broadband connection at home, they couldn't access their right to a public education. And so very quickly we organized to be able to push Comcast, which is the country's largest telecom provider, as well as major cable company, to provide open up a bunch of Wi-Fi hotspots in public land, as well as to create a free version of their discount internet program to make sure that kids could get online. And that was a good start. It went to a certain degree. It got some thousands of kids online. But what we found is that if you're a kid that is struggling with homelessness, or if you are in any kind of chaotic situation and you're transient for some reason, if you're a part of a family that might not be speaking English as a first language, or even sometimes if you have an old back bill, that there were these walls preventing you from getting Comcast internet. So we started a couple different campaigns. One is called Parking Lot Wi-Fi, where we worked with students around the city that couldn't access internet, or their organizations, and did a big hashtag campaign, pictures of kids using Wi-Fi in parking lots, because the school district said, hey, one thing we recommend is that you go to the parking lot of a public library or of a Starbucks to try to get internet, which we thought was egregious, to try to say that a student should access education that way. And we also started a major project with cities around the country and big organizations, including Media Justice and Color of Change and Free Press, called internetisessential.com, where city council members and community leaders are telling stories about how we still have millions of American kids living in rural areas, in urban areas, mostly poor folks, mostly kids of color, who we're totally offline. And so that's been a big part of our work at Movement Alliance Project for many years, which is to not just hold a company like Comcast accountable for where it stands on something like net neutrality, but to be able to actually like rigorously tell the story of how they stand between how just turning communications into a profit motive rather than a human right actually stands between our basic human dignities and the basic human dignities of elders, of children, of immigrants, of workers around the country, and their ability to just live a basic, connected life. And so we've had a lot of success so far in being able to not just push Comcast to do that initial opening up public hotspots, but now we're asking them to open up the private ones. So if you have an Xfinity hotspot tied to your home internet, your private network would stay protected, but it would be possible for students to access your personal network, something that residents around the city are certainly really supportive of, as well as to get Comcast to extend the speeds of their internet program to make it way better than just the 25 megabits per second that kids are using now, which is way too slow to have 3 or 4 kids plus a parent or 2 online at the same time, doing what you and I are doing right now, as well as make sure that free promotional program where it's like free and they extend it every few months just stays totally free through the whole pandemic, as well as open up those residential hotspots. So that's an ongoing fight that we're helping to lead, and a big part of our work at MAP.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's one of those things when you look at what big cable has really done. I mean, they've basically formed more or less an organized duopoly. And if they decide that their profit margins aren't going to be to their liking, they just won't build somewhere. So it's, when you really break it down, it's just so morally scary. Just being like, okay, Comcast gets to decide whether our kids learn or not in the digital age we live in. So yeah, it's just trying to get to this point where the internet is a human right, because it is. And, I think the permanent solution for that is just city-owned internet all across the country. But, the cable companies have set up the red tape to try to prevent that from happening.
That's right. And so in Pennsylvania, for example, back in 2005, the city of Philadelphia was being praised as one of the first in the nation to pursue a municipal broadband program called Philly Wireless. And our city council basically was moved really, really fast by the incumbent telecoms, by Comcast and Verizon. Those are the 2 big ones. Like most places in the United States, we have 1 or 2 big providers, and they pushed council to really water down the program. And then they also pushed on the state level to pass a law saying that you have to ask your local incumbent permission in order to build a local municipal network. And so that meant that most cities around the state couldn't have one, and the Philly one really fizzled out. But what we're seeing now in the face of the COVID pandemic, and this massive disconnect that millions and millions of people in this country are feeling, what we're starting to see is folks building community-based broadband. There's some incredible work that's been happening with the Detroit Community Technology Project in Detroit, with folks in New York City, and the Red Hook Broadband Project there. That's a municipal broadband or a community broadband project. And we're even piloting one in Philadelphia in North Square, which is a primarily working class Puerto Rican neighborhood here in Philadelphia. So by building and showing a proof of concept that communities want shared networks, then we're actually finding that there's like an incredible demand for it, and starting to build that popular argument that will hopefully eventually, when we have control of Congress and have control of the different apparatuses, these different legislatures, we can get rid of the broadband protections that these cable companies are having, and let our basic human rights get served by the people for the people, so we can all be online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I personally cannot explain the technological end of it, but, there was that study that Harvard did in conjunction with the Institute of Local Self-Reliance, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, where it showed case by case, 100% of the time, the only exceptions being when a municipal broadband project wasn't finished, the city option offered better internet at a better price. So it's just a no-brainer. And what that tells you, like you, the general person, is that quality internet infrastructure isn't necessarily a super hard or impossible feat. It's just not a priority of these entities whose first priority is just making as much money as possible.
Well, I think we're seeing that play out not just in the broadband like communications space. And if you want to learn more about cities, including in really red parts of the country, like Chattanooga, Tennessee has one of the fastest, best municipal broadband networks in the country, and Next Century Cities is a great place to learn about a lot of those, as well as with Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which you brought up. But we're seeing profit motive be centered again and again and again in the face of this crisis rather than basic human needs. And so telling the story about what we need to be doing online at a time of coronavirus shutdown and using internet as an example of this like intense profit motive in the face of, you know, a government really very much in thrall to those big corporations, like it's something that we think is a really important history lesson that's happening in real time that we're going to have to really work to dismantle over the next years. So.
Yeah, I always point that out too, where I say, look, this isn't a left-right thing, because you know where some of the most municipal broadband projects are happening in the country is in Tennessee. Why is that? Because they all look at Chattanooga and they're like, wait a second, they have some of the best internet in the world, like it's up there, and they pay cheaper than most people. I mean, the average cost I think is $67 a month for some of the best internet in the world.
It's like a gig up. It's a gig up. It's like really, or gig down. It's really fast. And like a bunch of other cities like Kansas City, there's like all of these really great build outs that are happening that because cities like took the plunge to say, we need to serve this as a public utility. And that's really what internet is in today's age, especially now.
No kidding, right?
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and